Hey, movie fans. I saw Supergirl a couple days ago this past Thursday. I was really excited for this movie. I thought the trailers looked great. You had a director Quill, which I loved. You also did I, Tonya, which I haven't seen that movie. I've heard that movie's really good, though. And I know this movie's taking inspiration from the Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow comic, which I haven't read that comic, so I can't really compare story-wise and if the characters are accurate to how they were personality-wise in that comic, or like plot beats from that comic. So for me, I'm just coming in as somebody who has not read a comic. I've seen images of what the comic looks like online, so I will say two things about the comic, which is I know what the villain looks like in the comic, and I know the comic has more of a psychedelic, like very colorful look to it. So I'll talk about those two things. When it comes to the positives with this movie, I think Billy Cock does a great job for what she's given to do in this movie, and I am interested to see her in the future back as Supergirl again. Like I do want to see more of a character in future movies. And another positive with this movie is that I thought Jason Momoa was great as Lobo. Yes, it's Jason Momoa playing Jason Momoa. I will say that. It's him playing himself. I didn't mind it though for this role because to me that's Lobo. And I think I did find some funny moments with the character. Another positive with this movie for me is that I thought David Corset. I loved him in Superman, James Gunn Superman already. I love him in this movie also, and I really like the relationship between him and Supergirl. I think they have really nice chemistry, and you really buy them as family. So I think the scenes between those two are really great, and I think David Corset, I loved him in Superman 2025, and he continues to be my favorite Superman in film since Christopher Reeve. Because I just think like when you see him as Superman, he brings so much warmth and so much personality to the character, and he feels so human to me. He feels relatable, and he just brings such joy to the character. So, so I think he's great in this movie. I loved him in his solo movie, and I loved him in this. So I can't wait for Man of Tomorrow. And he does a great job in this, like he did in Superman 2025. To me, he is my favorite Superman in film since Christopher Reeve. So he's another positive with this movie. And I would say another positive with this movie, and this is the last positive I had for this film, is that I think the Krypton Argo City scenes, I think those are great. I actually really enjoyed those scenes. Those were the scenes I felt the most invested in emotionally. So I really like those scenes when you don't get a lot of those scenes. Those scenes were really good though. When it comes to the negatives with this movie, I thought this movie was extremely mediocre and generic. And this movie has some script issues. I also found this movie to be dull looking. I wasn't a fan of the look of the movie. It has this like brown dull look to it, muted look to it. And this is where I'm going to compare the comic based on how the comic looks. One of the things that I noticed when I looked at images online of the comic is that, like I said, it's a very psychedelic color look. Like the colors in the Supergirl Woman Tomorrow comic really pop. They stick out. To me, I don't understand why they went for this dull, muted brown look to this movie. It just looked extremely, like I said, dull. And it had this just generic look to it. And I don't get that because when you have the comic, which really pops with the colors, I don't understand why you didn't make this movie as colorful as that comic. Like when I look at James Gunn's Superman movie, one of the things I love about James Gunn's Superman movie is that it stands out. It has so many emotional moments that stuck with me, and I feel like James Gunn's Superman movie really has this like really great comic book look to it, where it really pops. This movie just looks bland to me. Supergirl just looked extremely bland with the brown, dull movie color. So I wasn't really a fan of the look of the Supergirl movie personally. To me, the comic looks much better in my opinion. And then another thing I'm going to talk about with the comic, and goes into one of the negatives with the movie, is that the villain in this movie, Cram, he sucks. I just found him not an interesting villain. He never came off scary with that to me. And then one of the other problems I have is that from what I've seen online, in the comic, he looks human. He has wet hair, wet beard, and to me, the idea of that, again, I don't know how accurate personality-wise the two versions of the villains are from comic to film. The look of Prim, though, I prefer the look of how he looked in the comics. I think there's something scary about him looking like a human, and him being like a human trafficker that to me I feel like would be more scary when you can have somebody just look like a human being and this would be like tense and scary. Cram in this movie, he looks like a rejected man mask villain, or somebody that was from Yondu's crew of Ravagers and Guardians of the Galaxy. Like I'm not a fan of the whole Pearson look in his face, and he just looks. I didn't like the look of the look of the villain in this. To me, it's more scarier the fact he looks like a human being in a comic. And in this movie, it just felt like they were trying to make him look scary, just to like try to make him so he looks more like a monster, more evil, and it just didn't work for me. It's like you're trying too hard. And his performance, I thought, was terrible in this movie. There are times where he makes these like goofy facial expressions where he's trying to be scary, and I'm just like, you're just coming off goofy. And he never came off like a threat to me in this movie. So it's just like, and him being a human trafficker, they don't really go really dark with that stuff. I'm not saying I need to see what he does to like the women. It's just they don't. I felt like you could have gone harder with that element of his character. So he just ends up feeling like a generic villain that's not interesting. I don't like the look of the villain. I prefer the way he looks in the comic. And it just was a very forgettable villain that didn't come off like a threat or scary to me at all. And I felt like it was trying too hard. And his performance, which just came off goofy to me. I also have a problem in this movie. There's a moment where the villain decides to kill this one of the girls and her parents, and it just feels like it just did that just to have a shocking moment in the movie. And I also don't feel like that moment Supergirl really feels all that bad about it. Like I feel like they just had the villain do that just to have a shocking moment in the movie instead of like. And it just, like I said, it doesn't. You don't see it really affect Supergirl that much. So that moment felt kind of like, oh, we're just doing it just to be shocking. And then another problem I have with this movie is Supergirl's arc. And this is what I mean by Millie Cox does great for what she's given to do in this movie. My problem with Supergirl's arc in this movie is that you have that line in the trailer where she has that great line where she goes like, Superman sees the good in people, but I see the truth in people. And I love that line in the trailer. One of the problems I have with Supergirl's arc in this movie is that you never understand why she's so jaded, why she's so cynical towards people. You don't see anybody on Krypton or Argo City treat her badly. You don't see like anybody on the city of Argon on Krypton or Argo City where she sees like the worst of Kryptonian people or anything like that. Nobody, like I said, nobody treats her badly. So this movie never explains why she's so jaded. I can understand why she's drinking and why she has trauma for seeing her home destroyed and seeing her parents and having to leave her parents. The movie never explains though why she's so cynical at the end of the day though. Like why did she have what like the movie never explains to me why she doesn't have faith in people. Why she's so cynical towards people. Why she believes the worst in people. The movie never explains that, why she's so jaded. And that was a big problem with whole arc in this movie. Is that I can understand her having trauma because she remembers Krypton. She lost her home while Superman was a baby, so he had no memories of his parents from Krypton. So I can understand her having trauma. The movie never explains though why she is like personality wise, why she's so jaded though. So like I love that line in the trailer. The movie never really goes like shows why she has that viewpoint in the film though. So that was a problem with her story arc in this film for me. The accent is pretty generic also. I also found the edited during the accent to be kind of not that great. There's times where I felt like the way they edit that choreography was done like poorly at times. And overall the accent, just like I said, is generic. There's not a single accent scene in this movie that stood out to me. It all felt very bland and generic the accent to me in this movie. Same with the way the movie looks, like I said. And also the Ruthie character, and let me say this, maybe she's a really compelling character in that specific comic that this movie is taking inspiration from. The Ruthie character in this movie, though, I never found myself caring about her character. She wasn't very interesting to me. her relationship with Supergirl. They're trying to build up them being friends because Supergirl's helping her to get revenge for a family being killed by Cram the villain. I never found myself invested in that relationship. Like at the end, they're trying to make you feel emotional for their friendship when she has to leave, and I'm just like, I never felt it in the movie. Like this movie's trying to make me feel emotional. I just, to me, never felt it with that friendship in the movie. I also think it's just weird how at the end she says she's gonna go stay with her aunt, and I'm just like, it makes the whole event story feel kind of like, okay, why didn't you just stay with your aunt earlier in the movie? Like she doesn't bring up her aunt until like the very end of the film, which I thought was just again a weird writing choice when it comes to the poor script at times with this movie. I also have a problem with the way the film structured, which is that like the whole reason Supergirl decides to go with Lucy to help her get revenge for her family is because the villain that hosts Crypto. He poisons Crypto. So she has to go get the villain to get the antidote. The thing with this movie though is that the problem I have is that I never felt invested in the Crypto and Supergirl relationship when it comes to how much Crypto means to her because Crypto gets taken out very early in the movie. And yeah, I love Crypto in the Superman movie, and I love Crypto and Superman's relationship in that movie when it comes to how Crypto the dog is around Superman. I thought it was really funny in that movie. The problem I had though is that we don't, you don't really get a whole lot with how Crypto is with Supergirl in this movie, and since you don't really get any of that in Superman, it just like to me you can't just take the fact that I love Crypto in the Superman movie and just expect me to be like, oh yeah, I care about Supergirl and her dog when this movie didn't give me a whole lot of scenes between her and the dog. Like you don't get a whole lot with home crypto until you get to the Krypton stuff, and there's not a lot of stuff in that movie, and that stuff doesn't come until like the middle chunk of the film, after crypto's already been poisoned and she's having to go get the antidote. So I just feel like you could have had some stuff at the beginning of home crypto to get me really invested in her wanting to save her dog instead of taking Crypto out so quickly at the start of the movie and then giving me scenes with home crypto and Krypton and like later on in the film. So the way the movie structured, I just think was like structured in a way where it didn't get me invested in the Crypto and Supergirl relationship and how much the dog means to her when it comes to that relationship. So that was another problem out with the script for the movie. I also have an issue with the ending of this movie, and I'm going to spoil something here. So if you haven't seen Supergirl, stop the video now. She makes a choice at the end of the movie that is like the ending of Man of Steel. And the problem I have with Supergirl killing the villain at the end of this film, Cram, is the fact that the whole movie she's telling Lucy, don't you can't take a life. It will change you. You can't kill. And the problem I have at the end when she decides to kill Cram is that well she's been telling Lucy through this whole movie not to kill. You can't kill. Don't do it. And I'm just like, well, what was the point of her constantly telling Lucy not to kill in this movie if she's just going to kill the villain at the end? So that was another problem I had with that choice at the end. Now, let me say this. I could change my mind of her killing the villain if that actually leads to consequences in the future for future appearances. Because when I compare it to Man of Steel, one of the issues I have with the Man of Steel ending with General Zod, yeah, you see him scream. Then in the next movie, he pushes the guy through multiple walls. That's holding Lois. That has Lois, and he pushes the guy through a human being multiple walls. So it felt like there was no consequences. So I could change my mind about Supergirl killing the villain in this movie if it actually leads to some consequences. Like if this leads to Supergirl and Superman having different opinions on like whether you should kill or not, that could be interesting in future movies for this version of Supergirl. At the same time, though, it makes no sense when throughout this whole movie you're telling Ruthie not to kill and how much that would affect you. You can't, that you can't do that. So it kind of like, to me, it hurts that part of the Ruthie character, that part of the story arc in the movie when you have Supergirl kill him when she's been telling Ruthie throughout the whole entire movie to not kill and how it would affect you so much if you take a life. So that's one of the problems I also have with the script writing in this movie. So that was like another issue, just the writing wise in this movie when it comes to ending. I also think it's weird that when she decides to take Krim's life, the next scene is so talking to Superman about staying on Earth. So I really love that scene. Again, I really like the chemistry between her and David Cronstadt. You really believe them as family, and I really enjoyed the moments between those two characters in this movie. Though I found it at the same time, I found it to be a weird choice when she's at peace and she's all happy and telling us, "I want to stay on Earth and stay around," after she just killed somebody. So that was a weird writing choice, and it just felt like I was like, okay, so she's completely at peace killing somebody, and that's now she wants to be a hero. So it was a weird way they just did that at that when it comes to an odd writing choice there. And this is also another thing. The moment where Ruthie's parents died, I also thought it was kind of weird that her brother like popped up to scare her before Lucy's parents died. I thought that was like a weird moment. I was like, okay, that moment was just kind of odd writing to me. And then here's another problem with this movie is that this movie just feels like it's just a bunch of different movies thrown together. There's nothing about this movie that stands out. There's nothing unique about this movie when it comes to the story. Also, the dialogue at times is pretty bad. I don't think like sometimes the dialogue isn't all that good. And this movie feels like if you put Mad Max, because there's times this movie it looks like kind of like the wasteland, like this dope planet, and like I said, the villain in this movie feels like a rejected Mad Max villain with the way he looks. So at times it kind of has this Mad Max look to it, and it also you have the whole trope of like her dog getting hurt, which I feel like has become a cliche now in movies. It's like we've seen that done in plenty of movies, and we've seen it done better. Like John Wick, in my opinion, did that much better. When you see his dog die, it's like yeah, you like I feel like that movie got me invested in John Wick and him wanting to kill the guys. To me, that movie did it better, and I just feel like the whole like killing your dog just so that way you can care about the main character. I mean, hurting the dog, excuse me, hurting the dog. I feel like we've seen that trope done a million times in other movies, and we've seen it done better. So it just feels like a trope at this point. So it feels like if you put John Wick, if you put Man Mask, it's also the aliens. The look of the like different alien species in this movie, it pretty much feels like Guardians of the Galaxy to me. This feels like it at times looks like Guardians of the Galaxy when it comes to like this space opera and these aliens, but lacks the personality and fun and the heart of the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. So I mean, even Supergirl, like listening to music. 'Cause I think they show in this movie she has a Walkman. Like that's pretty much solid. So there's just things where it felt like Guardians of the Galaxy to me, and to me, Guardians of the Galaxy, and that's it. This movie felt like it felt like other movies that were better. So this movie just had no unique voice. This Supergirl movie, there's nothing about story wise that stood out to me. So overall, my viewpoints on Supergirl is that it was a very mediocre, generic comic book movie. I don't think it's terrible. It's not one of the worst comic book movies that I've seen. It's just a very disappointing movie because coming off of Superman 2025, I love that movie and I was really excited for this DC universe, and I still am. I don't think I'm not with fans who are like going like, "Oh, this DC universe, this new DC universe is dead." I'm like, no, it's one movie. Like if Clayface turns out to be really good or great, and then Man of Tomorrow turns out to be really good or great, which I think those movies will, then to me, I think it'll get people back on board with this DC universe. To me, one movie does not kill a universe. And the same thing I feel about my excitement. This to me was a misfire when it comes to just feeling mediocre. This was to me a misstep. Not a misstep to the point where I think it's bad, not to a point where I think it's one of the worst movies of the year, one of the worst comic movies I've seen. And not a point where I think, and not to a point where I think, oh, the DC universe is dead based on this one movie. No, to me, I came out of this movie feeling very lukewarm and just very mediocre on it. I don't think it's as bad as other people have said it. I also don't think it's very good or great either. And I will say this: the girl who wrote this movie is also the one who's writing the Wonder Woman movie. I think she's working on a Teen Titans movie too. This does make me concerned about those two movies because I personally don't want this writer to write the Wonder Woman movie that they're working on, and for my host, she's also writing a Teen Titans movie, and I do not want her writing any more DC movies after this because this movie had a lot of script issues, and this does not make me feel confident in her writing any DC movies after this. And again, and maybe this was just like a bad day at the office for. Just for me personally, this makes me not feel confident in those two movies if you're gonna have this writer. So another thing too. That's another thing I want to say is that this doesn't make me too feel too confident in those two movies if you're gonna have her as the writer for those two films after this. Overall, like I said, it's a mediocre movie. I'm still interested to see Mary Cock as Supergirl in the future. I just think to me this was a movie that was bland, it was generic, it was forgettable. It had had some script issues, and I know this movie went through like 3 composers and went through. I think this movie had like 10 test screenings. I know it had like a lot of test screenings, more than a usual movie, so I think that was not really a good sign. So I just hope that in the future James Gunn makes sure to really like go over these scripts for this DC universe because this to me is an example of this is a side thing, but this is an example when I feel like James Gunn needs to sometimes not talk online so much because the fact he's like him saying this was one of the greatest scripts this movie, and look, maybe the script was great in paper and just through production and editing and maybe this like the script got messed up when they actually filmed it, or they made changes. Again, it had like a bunch of test screenings, so maybe this is one of those examples where the script was better on paper, and just when they started filming, something happened during filming. That could be it. At the end of the day, though, I hope James Gunn makes sure to really check these scripts for these movies going forward because this to me was not one of the greatest scripts, the Supergirl movie, and this definitely had script issues. So that's my thoughts on Supergirl. It's watchable. It's just a very mediocre, forgettable movie. You can wait to watch that at home, in my opinion. You don't need to go out to theaters to see this one. And look, it just sucks. I wanted to come out of this movie loving it. I wanted to come out really enjoying it because I came off James Gunn Superman really excited, and at least I still am excited for this DC universe. This to me though was a misstep. So that's my thoughts on Supergirl. Until next time, movie fans.